Hello friends of YouTube, welcome back to the channel. Mike here, and last night I finished reading In the Shadow of the Banyan by Vaddey Ratner. And she is originally from Cambodia. This was a really complex book emotionally, although I would say easy to read. As far as just the complexity, it's not a complex book to read. It's told from the perspective of a child, and it's about the author's actual experiences, excuse me, growing up in Cambodia, which was coming out of a civil war, and the communist brand, some type of communist brand, um, Khmer Rouge, had come to power and were imposing their ideology and their political idea on the entire country, which involved uh, ripping wealthy people from their properties and homes, moving them into smaller villages, and a lot of killing and starvation and further war eventually with Vietnam happened as a result of this regime. So all these things come into play in the book, and the author was a between the ages of 5 and 9 when all this happened. So the main character in the book is 7-year-old Rami, and it begins in the capital of Phnom Penh, I believe it's pronounced. And she and her family, and this is real, the author is actually part of the royal family of Cambodia. One of her ancestors was actually the emperor of Cambodia, involved in, if I'm not mistaken, dismantling the kind of the old structures of power. Her family actually represented more of the liberal democratic views of the country, but tragically it went in a very far communist direction, and they ended up with a very radical government. So the story actually begins when the narrator Rami is in the estate. Rami is basically a self-insert for the author. It is, for all intents and purposes, the author. She is. She has polio, so some difficulty walking, and her family is preparing for a New Year's feast on in the middle of this Cambodian civil war, which is wrapping up around them. And as I stated, this group that comes out on top at the end of the civil war, being of a very radical brand of communism, decides to take all the wealthy people from their homes, including them, and they are moved to a monastery. And then from this monastery, they are moved to a smaller village where the majority of the book takes place. Now, Rami has a very close relationship with her father. Her father is a poet. The book itself, the writing is very poetic, is really, really lovely writing. The descriptions of landscapes and the most poetic moments of the book were actually my favorites. In other words, the parts of the book that were not describing kind of the horrific events of war, or, but I think the horrific events of war, and then the regime's treatment of people, and the hunger and disease and all the bad stuff that happens, forms an important contrast with the beauty of the writing and the beauty of the landscapes and the poetry that's always in this young 7-year-old girl's mind, about the moon, and about, the poetry of her father really comes alive in the imagination of the 7-year-old girl narrator. And that contrast between the horrible things that are happening and the mind of this girl, it creates something pretty unique. which I think is the best part about the book and the most moving part about it. And it was a very moving book. Um, I think it's fairly easy to read, like 315 pages, and it's not, for the context, it's not, as I was trying to get at, as dark as you might imagine. Like, there were a lot of the books that were just kind of slice of life in a way, and like their time just kind of living in the monastery or living among a family of peasants that they were forced to live with, but actually become close to. And what you get out of this is a very humanized version of the events that took place here. While I did enjoy The Mountains Sing from Vietnam, which treats a similar topic in the sense that you have a communist government takes over, there's repression, radical policies, etc. A lot of the peasants in that book, The Mountains Sing, were kind of representative as this mass angry mob who were resentful towards the rich, and like the soldiers as just that supported the government as being brainwashed and kind of as lesser people, really. Like the people who supported the government were just this like brainwashed masses, right, without their own autonomy and so on. And that to me really got in the way of the book's message, which was forgiveness and that Vietnam needs reconciliation. Because if you're going to see one side as brainwashed mobs or resentful masses, you're not moving towards understanding or reconciliation. Now, it's true, in the case of Cambodia here in this book, and historically, the very young people were given guns and recruited as part of this idealistic movement that had spread a lot of misinformation in the country, and did try to, in some sense, brainwash the people. But that doesn't mean that the people themselves, ate it up or whatever. It's the peasants. I don't know if I like using that word, but like the farmers that the Rami and what remains of her family going there to live with the farmers are shown as very human, very intelligent in what they do, and even the narrator herself in a moment admires them and their ability to work with the land, and says, oh, now I understand why this government wants us all to be like them. The government, the communist government, or the Khmer Rouge, is referred to as the organization rather sinisterly throughout the book. But yeah, even the soldiers of the revolution are portrayed in a human light. Every character is just portrayed as a human, right? And there's kind of just this sinister organization at the top sending down orders, and a few people who like to throw their power around, which there always are, use this to their advantage. And that to me was a much more realistic way to show it, rather than kind of a mass angry mob going around. But who knows, maybe that was the experience in Vietnam versus this child's experience. I don't know. Kind of went off on a tangent there, but it is a really good book. And there's, again, some really moving moments in it. And I was kind of disappointed how one of the characters' story arcs ends. There was one I was like really disappointed in, that maybe it was like true to life, but I was like, oh, did it really have to end that way? And maybe it was true, but it was just like, it was just a bummer, and it's like, what do you even learn from it? But maybe that's the point. I mean, some of the stuff in the book was just so unbelievable that humanity could sink to this level, and that a government, this organization, could be so irrational and so lacking in humanity, because even most of the people who I would in my life that I know that are left or would consider themselves socialists or whatever, they don't deny people's individuality or their humanity, or try to turn them into ants. But that is essentially what this organization is shown as trying to do, like turn people into ants with no emotions, with no, like, it's a very extreme ideology. And I don't know if that's the way it actually was in Cambodia, but like, it's a very extreme ideology that's represented in this book, and very dehumanizing to everybody. And so Rami and her family just kind of surviving, living daily life, learning how to do rice farming, digging ditches. The book is full of like a lot of mundane activities. It's not a particularly like exciting or action-packed book, which I loved. I really enjoyed kind of just the fact that this book shows you what life was like. It shows the ups and the downs, and there's so many moments of meditation on the landscapes and the work and the situation they're in, and just descriptions. You feel like you're there. You know, it somehow manages to create a slice of life in a slice of life that was so extraordinary and so detached from what their actual day-to-day life was. But it's sort of a case of, you know, the rich, this family that was part of royalty is now forced to work as peasants. And there are coming to terms moments in the books where, for example, Rami's father will meditate on or talk about a incident he had as a child where a poor person was beat for having an argument with him because he was royalty and that person was poor, and he says, you know, maybe this is our karma for that. There are Cambodian legends that are interwoven in the book that show that even in these Cambodian legends, you have stories of emperors who execute entire families of the merchants or poor people, that show that there is this past that Cambodia is trying to reconcile with. They're not, in essence, the book is not blaming this revolution and this extreme sort of situation on the ideology of Marxism, as many books like this are tempted to do. What it is doing is self-reflecting on its own country and the failures of its own country and its own rulers, and how they've brought this situation of vengeance on itself in a way. And it's not trying to play a blame game. It's looking at the cycle of history, and trying to only from that point can you actually start to grapple with an actual solution, because like, real oppression in the world is real, and you can't just say that everybody who fights against oppression is just making themselves a victim. That's too much of a blanket statement as well. So I had to grapple with that while reading the book, but also the this book gets into ideas like, how much can a person take and still go on? The amount of suffering that this young girl sees, that her family sees. Some of her family members lose their minds and can't continue on in this scenario. A lot of it is about her mental survival as much as Rami's physical survival, and her mother's, especially. Those are, I would say, the two central characters, but her father is also a really central character, in a different kind of way. Yeah, it's just a really beautiful book, a really thought-provoking book, a really good book. Trying to think what else I want to say. Beautiful language. There's another book by the author as well, which I actually would be interested to read, because I was really impressed with what this book did, how it showed the characters. I felt it's really representative of Cambodia too, somehow, in the sense that it showed things from the perspective of both the poor and the rich. And even though it's obviously written from the perspective of somebody born into an advantaged or privileged position, they lost all that and had to, live among everybody else in these village collectives. And then eventually, the author went to the United States and graduated from university, Cornell, I believe it was, and then wrote this book. And really, it's really great that we have it. Cambodia is, from what I can tell, in a much better place these days than this book shows in this time period. But it's still an important story, and I absolutely think that as far as a book to understand this is not the book to understand, the political context, the historical context, but there is some of that in there. And again, it accomplishes what really fiction does best in transmitting the mythologies of a culture and relating them to what, human universals and what makes us all human, and the struggles that we face in every society of inequality, of hardship. Nature is certainly not represented, even though there are beautiful descriptions of landscapes in nature. Nature is represented as it is, hard, difficult. There's leeches that can get inside you. You got to watch out for when you're rice farming and things like that. So while it does romanticize kind of a bit of the rice farming, it also shows the ugly side of it. And it connects so much to, I just felt that there was no cultural barrier here for me to enter this book, and it felt pure, it felt real, and very readable, and just I would recommend it. So In the Shadow of the Banyan by Vaddey Ratner, good book, and I'll leave the review at that today. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for the next book. I've been working on a couple difficult ones at the moment, so I'm not sure which will be the next. But once again, I appreciate the subscribes, the comments, the likes. Thank you to everyone who does that, and for following me along on this journey. All right, have a great day.